Hello, everyone. My name is Braxton, and I am a student reporter for Shippensburg University. I was assigned a recent task to look up information that interests me and came across some very good information. I researched pay rates for people and found this country has a serious issue with paying equal wages to everyone. This leads me to research into why the wage gap is such a serious issue in the country, and I discovered some shocking information. I started my research by going online and finding as much raw data as I could, but I was not able to fully make sense of some of the key factors. So I went to my campus career center and spoke with Sarah McDowell. Miss McDowell is the Associate Director of the Career and Communication Engagement Center. She gave me a lot of insight on the gender and ethnic wage gap.
My name is Sarah McDowell-Shupp, and I'm the Associate Director of the Career and Community Engagement Center at Shippensburg University. I consider myself to be a career development professional, student affairs practitioner, and really just in general a career counselor.
We talked for about 20 minutes and went into detail about a few hot topics. We discussed how previous wages make a huge difference in the long run when it comes to getting more money.
So a lot of my experience has been through my last 10 years working on a college campus. I've advised and worked with thousands of college students, both graduate and undergraduate, as they are getting job offers, as they're negotiating job offers, and often that includes salary and wages. Anecdotally, I have definitely seen where women or people of color have been offered a different salary or a different wage than typically their white male counterparts. Statistically, we also know that this is the case. One of the things I tell students a lot when I'm working with them is to encourage them to negotiate for a higher salary when they start, because even though a difference of $5,000 or $6,000 might not sound like a lot now, like let's say that they're offering you 45 but you really wanted 50, the issue becomes 5 or 10 years from now, wherever you started with your salary, that's kind of how you grow. Unfortunately, in the US, there is no legislation that prevents employers from asking for a salary history, and a salary history can be very damaging for someone because basically the employer is saying, well, I'm only going to pay you based on what other people paid you before.
We talked about some of the factors that go into the wage gap issue.
It doesn't surprise me. There's a lot of factors at play in this. So occupational choice is one. Typically, and I'm speaking very broadly, typically Asian American men are more likely to be employed in careers in science, math, and technology, which we have a greater need for in the US and which we as a society place more value on. For example, if you look at the salary of a teacher in the US compared to a computer scientist, they're going to be very different because we value that computer scientist more than we value teachers in terms of salary. So with Asian American men, I could see why occupational choice would have something to do with that. However, gender bias and ethnic stereotypes are also at play at that. When, something that you hear a lot with Asian Americans is the model minority. So Asian Americans tend to, when they say model minority, very smart, very quiet, very submissive.
We also spoke about what she thought some of my raw data that I collected truly means. After discussing this issue with her, I had a better grasp on the data. Yet I was still not satisfied with some of the answers I got from Miss McDowell. So I decided to speak to a couple economists. I figured that since they study money and economy, they can give me some great insight on the issue. I met with Professor Finucane and Professor Kalis of the Economy Department at Shippensburg University. They both had similar things to say, but both focused in more on one rather than the other. Professor Finucane spoke extensively about how education is one of the biggest factors to contribute to this issue.
It's closer to home as well. And it's not just Pennsylvania, it's most of the states across the country. That when it comes to funding public education, K through 12, right, that most of the funding comes from local property taxes. And there's very little money that they're willing to put in from the state level, right? It'll look like a large amount based on the total number of dollars, but when you look at it as a percentage of the school budget, it's a small percentage. And so we end up with a very unequal educational system.
Professor Kalis spoke more on the discrimination within the workplace that leads to more wage gap issues.
Okay. I'm Professor David Kalist. I am the chairman of the Department of Economics at Shippensburg University, where I teach numerous economics courses. I have a PhD in economics, where I specialize in labor and health issues, and also a little bit of sports economics and just applied work in general. Another explanation for the wage gap is just simply discrimination. And discrimination, is in labor economics, how we would define discrimination, treating two equally productive people differently because of race, gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, or whatever the case may be. So some of this wage gap due to discrimination, it's possible, but I would argue it's probably not being driven by systematic discrimination in the economy. And here's why. Discrimination and profit maximization are not compatible.
Both professors did agree on the fact that there is no just one issue that contributes to this, but multiple issues. From education to discrimination to the lack of opportunity, there are many factors. Now, after listening and discussing the facts with these highly respected individuals, I felt strongly that I could determine what the data was telling me. First thing I discovered is that all Americans are not equal in wages, but a pretty large majority are getting underpaid. This goes worse for women in terms of wages. In almost every chart that I have, white males are at 100% pay rate. All other races, other than Asian American males, were lower on the wage scale by at least 18%. My most shocking information was that Asian American males are making 117% of what white males are making. I know that the stereotype was that Asians are quiet, smart, and humble, yet I didn't think about how that stereotype may play into getting hired for a job or picking for particular assignments. That type of action is something that we call ingrained racism. Ingrained racism is a bias that has been taught or learned over many years and is practiced unconsciously. These traits can include a fear of black males walking in groups at night towards you, along with many others.
I think everybody has unconscious bias. I think that's just the nature of humans. I think that's who we are as a society. And I don't think that in and of itself is a bad thing. When we choose to not examine that, and we choose to not act on it, and we choose to stay ignorant of that fact, that's when it becomes hurtful, and that's when it can affect you salary-wise.
All I know is that this issue is not going to be solved anytime soon. The only way to truly make change on the wage gap is to go to legislation and start pitching ideas for new laws that get heard. First thing that can be pitched is to change the law that employers can see your previous salary. Most employers, when they see your previous salary, don't want to pay you more for a job if you have already worked for less. Another thing that can help is more equitable education for all grades and people. Equitable education is when everyone is learning the same thing at the same rate and are given the same tools to learn the material as everyone else. In a nutshell, it is asking for equal education no matter if you go to public school in the city or public school in the suburbs, whether or not you go to Catholic school or a private school in the city, as well as a private or Catholic school in the suburbs. Lastly, we would like to encourage more employers to hire based on credentials and not just how a name sounds or where a person comes from. For example, there were studies done recently that shows employers choosing new employees by just the way the name sounds, determining whether or not it is more respectable or ghetto. Hopefully, some of this new information will truly help in changing the wage gap. Reporting live, I'm Darren Braxton.